punched him in the mouth, or threatened to knock their head off for talking to you like, or looking at you like you're a woman. You know, when you approach a real man about his masculinity, you're gonna get a real reaction back. So we're gonna do this respectfully, otherwise we'll end in a duel. And I mean a duel, real life duel, where only one person walks away.
Before Terrence Howard ever graced the big screen, before the Oscar nods, before Empire, his life was already playing out like a gritty street film. But this was real, and it was ugly.
Somebody be standing right next to you after trying to kill you and smiling in your face like nothing ain't ever happened.
He was born into violence, raised in the shadow of a father who physically abused him and ended up stabbing someone. He was soaked in it. Like many other lost boys do in America's forgotten neighborhoods, he turned to the streets.
You gotta take drugs. You're going through so much to try and deal with life.
The actor himself confirmed that he had real ties to the Crips in his youth.
In the old world, men didn't hide behind anything when they spoke against someone. They had to speak it with their whole being.
He didn't flirt with gang life. He lived it. When the world forgot him, the set embraced him. He bled with them, survived with them, became one of them. That street loyalty didn't disappear when he entered Hollywood. It just went underground.
It's a difference when a guy walks in a room and when a man walks into a room. And a man don't take the same things that a guy will accept. So always be the man in the room.
Now, decades later, that past creeps out like a shadow. In boardrooms, on movie sets, in beefs with other celebrities where Howard doesn't threaten lawyers. He offers duels, and people laugh, until they realize he's not joking.
We can meet with guns, bottles, knives, or books and equations. But we're gonna do this like men. So, get ready.
This is the story of a man who made it out of the Crips, but never forgot where he came from. How did he build such deep ties with the gang? Let's talk about it. Terrence Howard is supposed to be the polished actor with green eyes, silk-lined suits, and a calm, poetic cadence. The man who played Lucius Lyon, the manipulative music mogul with blood on his hands and charm in his veins.
How would Lucius Lyons handle this trial?
I think the courtroom would have been blown up.
Hollywood loved that Terrence, the one who smiled on red carpets, danced between dramas and thrillers, and occasionally dropped cryptic musings about the universe. But behind that soft drawl and refined exterior was a quieter, darker one.
I've spent a lifetime earning the right to speak with the conviction about these truths that I speak.
It's a story the streets know all too well. Before he was ever on the screen, Terrence had already survived enough chaos to fill a whole season of Empire. Born in Chicago but raised in Cleveland, he didn't come from calm. He came from pain. When he was 2 years old, he witnessed his father, Tyrone Howard, stab a man to death during a dispute over a line to see Santa Claus. Blood spilled in front of his little eyes.
When you're dreaming and you're falling, and you hit the bottom and you wake up.
Tyrone went to prison for manslaughter. When he came back, he brought hell with him. Terrence, his brothers, and their mother. The family fractured.
Now, we were really poor. My dad had just gotten out of prison, for manslaughter. I didn't have much.
His mother packed them up and headed west, chasing an acting career in Los Angeles. But in trying to outrun the past, they stepped into something else entirely. West LA in the 80s wasn't just palm trees and movie deals, it was gang wars, street politics, and a whole lot of lost boys looking for belonging. Howard was just another light-skinned kid wandering unfamiliar sidewalks. By the time he was a teenager, that message had turned into a constant echo. His mother, still a child herself when she gave birth to him, did her best. But trying to raise a boy in the jagged concrete maze of inner-city America while dragging the weight of her own trauma is like trying to tame a storm with a whisper, especially since Terrence also had a younger brother.
She told me the reason that she was babying Antonio was because he had asthma, and my father always had questioned whether it was his son or not because he looked so much like her family and didn't look so much like him.
Now, the streets didn't greet Terrence with open arms. They tested him. The green eyes that would later make casting agents swoon were a liability back then. Being mixed race wasn't exotic. It was a reason to get jumped. They mocked him, beat on him, called him a mutt. But after enough bruises and enough grit, he got his pass. When Terrence's uncle taught him how to box at 13, he thought he was just teaching him to fight back. But what he was really doing was handing him a language the streets understood. After that, Terrence didn't just walk different, he moved different. His fist told a story: I'm not soft, I'm not scared, and I will hit back. And that's when the Crips came in. He got put on by the Mansfield Hustlers, a crew that eventually folded into the Mansfield Gangster Crips out of West LA. The Mansfield Gangster Crips were making their name out west around this time, born out of the same frustration and ambition that fueled young black men across the country. Built from the block up, first as hustlers, then as something harder. Terrence wasn't loud about it. He wasn't the one flashing signs or posting up on corners for the camera, but he knew the codes, knew how to move. Word on the street is he hustled small time with weed, crack, even some crystal. He did what he had to do. He was never trying to be the biggest, just respected. And he was, not just as a dude from the hood, but someone who moved like he'd been through something, because he had. To the outside world, the blue flag is about violence and clout. But to a kid like Terrence, it was a shield. He didn't jump in for power or to play gangster. He joined because he was tired of being prey.
Who knows what happened to Philip? Who knows what he had to do in order to get to where he was at? There's a lot of things that people do that end up sitting and they can't get over it.
With the Crips, he found a brotherhood that didn't flinch. Men who had been through the same fires, who didn't ask questions about your scars, who didn't care about your skin tone, only your loyalty. With them, he wasn't Terrence the victim. He was just one of them. They taught him the code. No snitching, no crying. Always handle your business. It wasn't a gang to him. It was family. And unlike the family he was born into, this one didn't walk away. So he wore that blue-like armor, not to stunt, not to flex, but because it was the only thing that had ever made him feel safe. But there's an incident that still lingers in the underground lore. It was in a moment of defiance, and a life was nearly lost. Terrence had built a kind of peace between rival sets. Even as a Mansfield Crip, he had ties with someone from schoolyard, a guy named Baby Boy. One day, word got out that a hit was coming. One of Terrence's own big homies was planning to take Baby Boy out, but Terrence warned him, broke the code, told him to get low. Baby Boy listened, and survived. But the hood doesn't reward betrayal, even if it's done from a place of peace. Terrence paid for that tip-off. His own crew jumped him. He ended up with a busted lip and black eye.
Confront them together. Teach them to think about manners and loyalty, you know?
Message received. But fate has a funny way of flipping the script. Not long after that, Terrence was caught slipping, alone at a bus stop, out of bounds from his set. A car crept up with schoolyard Crips inside. They recognized him, hopped out. He had 3 straps pointed at his chest. No backup, no time to explain. It should have been the end of him. But then, like something out of a film he hadn't written yet, Baby Boy pulled up. Same dude he warned days before, and Baby Boy told them to stand down. Told them Terrence was solid, that he'd saved his life. Terrence would later reflect on that moment, reportedly saying that if Baby Boy hadn't intervened, he wouldn't be here.
It's not about black eyes or bloody noses in this world. It's life or death, and if you don't toughen up.
Simple as that. That brush with death didn't just mark him, it changed him. And it put distance between him and the street life that almost swallowed him. But here's the thing about that life. You don't ever really leave it. Not fully. You carry it. In the way you look over your shoulder, in the way you speak with weight, in the respect you demand without raising your voice. Terrence never went on record screaming gang affiliations, but those who know. He moved like a shadow, precise, intentional, ready. People knew not to test him, not because he shouted, but because he didn't. That silence, that quiet stare he gives in interviews, the one that makes even seasoned journalists pause, that's not Hollywood, that's not an act, that's discipline. Discipline born from knowing a wrong word, a wrong look could be your last. He wasn't a hothead, but when he moved, it was decisive. Hollywood would later label it intensity. Casting directors said he had presence.
It's a difference when a guy walks in a room and when a man walks into a room. And a man don't take the same things that a guy will accept. So always be the man in the room.
But that presence didn't come from drama school. It came from nights where he stood alone, knowing if something popped off, no one was coming to save him. It came from walking through neighborhoods where smiles could turn to setups, where trust could get you killed. It came from the Crips teaching him how to read a room without a word, how to measure risk by instinct, how to be ready. You can see it in his early roles. That tight jaw, that deliberate pause before speaking, the eyes that scan, even when he's supposed to be still. People thought he was just a gifted actor. actor, but really he was living out the same instincts he'd honed in alleyways and backlots. He wasn't channeling the streets, he was the streets wearing a Hollywood mask. And yet, the streets aren't a fairy tale. That kind of life carves you out. It costs. It teaches you to love with suspicion, to smile with caution, to never let your guard down, not even when you're in a mansion, not even when you've got an Oscar nod under your belt. So sometimes, Terrence gets humble.
I shouldn't have commented on Jamie's album. Black people got to stop talking about each other. You make a mistake, look, Jamie, I'm sorry, man. You still my man.
Though the Crips gave him safety when he was a teen, but even that protection has limits. The streets aren't loyal, they're just consistent. And if you don't play the game right, they'll turn on you as quick as they took you in. Still, for Terrence, they filled a hole nothing else ever could. He didn't need validation from the industry. He already had his stripes. He already knew how to hold a stare and not blink, knew how to walk into a room and make people shift without raising his voice. The Brotherhood had molded him into a man who didn't need to prove anything, because survival was proof enough. Terrence's experience has made him into a man so committed to the old codes of manhood, he's out here offering duels. Actual duels. Swords, pistols, take your pick. The internet once said someone rubbed him the wrong way on a project and he calmly suggested they settle things like gentlemen. Not with lawsuits, not with passive-aggressive tweets, but with a proper 19th century throwdown. No one called his bluff. And can you blame them? This is the same guy who once told Patrick Bet David that giving up your manhood in Hollywood comes with a spiritual death sentence. According to Terrence, once you trade in your principles, especially for fame, roles, or the fluidity some circles encourage, you don't get to walk that energy back.
Howard decided to step away from different roles like Marvel and things like that, and he said that basically he does certain things to keep his integrity.
That's why he walks into rooms like he owns them, because he hasn't given up that energy. He's the guy still wearing his man card like a badge, ready to flash it like a federal agent if anybody gets too cute. And while some actors lose themselves in Hollywood's velvet cages, Terrence just lit a cigar and threw the match over his shoulder. That's what makes his whole vibe dangerous. Directors know it, producers know it, even fellow actors get that twinge in their gut when Terrence strolls up with that trademark lean, equal parts swagger and sermon. And let's be honest, you can't fake that. Guys like 50 Cent or DaBaby talk tough, but even they might take a seat if Terrence offers them pistols at dawn over a bad script rewrite. There's a story, half legend, half whispered truth, that he once confronted a producer over a contract dispute. Didn't yell, didn't call his agent, just stood up, locked eyes, and said something like, "We can resolve this now, or I can meet you at sunrise. Your choice." The man folded. Of course he did. You don't argue with someone who looks like he stepped off the set of Hamilton, but is dead serious about slicing your dignity in half. Even behind the curtains at award shows, Terrence has this air about him, like he's not there for claps or golden statues. He's scanning the room like he's in a Western saloon, one wrong look away from slapping a white glove across someone's cheek. There's a clip of him just chilling backstage, but if you watch closely, you'll notice his stance, like he's not there to celebrate, but to settle accounts. Terrence's version of Hollywood politics is something you'd expect from a Renaissance warrior, not a guy with an Oscar nomination. But that's the contradiction that makes him magnetic. On the one hand, he's the guy who played Lucius Leone, cutthroat mogul with a flair for dramatic exits. On the other, he's calling out the entire industry's hypocrisy to their face, while refusing roles that compromise what he calls the man card. That infamous PBD podcast episode, he didn't just open the book, he dropped the whole library. He told that story about how Puffy invited him to hang out, wanted acting lessons. But when Terrence got there was no script, just vibes. He played some music. Puffy stared, no feedback, just vibes. Then the assistant leans in and says what everyone else was already thinking.
My assistant was like, he wants to hang out with you next week. And I was like, for what? He's like, I think he's trying to you. That's what my assistant said.
And right there, Terrence made his decision. Not just to walk away, but to warn others. To not play that game. He's lost deals over it, burned bridges, but he stayed standing. Because to him, that's what real men do. He has turned down parties, sniffed out shady producers, and flat out refused to play the industry's twisted little games. You could almost hear the silence on the other end of that mic when he said he doesn't bend over in that way.
I've lost businesses because I don't bend over in that way. I don't compromise. I don't play gay roles. I don't kiss a man. I don't do that.
That's the kind of quote that makes PR reps sweat and studio execs shuffle scripts under the rug. But Terrence said it with the kind of calm that only comes from a man who's turned down money, fame, and opportunity. all in the name of not being owned. For Terrence, the saying, "broken boys become dangerous men," was prophecy. After the incident with his father in that Cleveland mall, the blood, the screaming, the cold clang of steel, something in him hardened. The warmth of childhood had already been slipping away, but that moment iced him over. He didn't just learn that the world could turn violent in an instant. He learned that no one would save him when it did. From then on, trust wasn't an option, not in the cops, who seemed more interested in punishing than protecting, not in adults, who were often too broken themselves to offer any kind of blueprint, and certainly not in the system, which had already marked him in ink. In Philly, he learned to keep his mouth shut and his eyes wide. In Cleveland, he kept his back to the wall and his fists ready. Terrence wasn't the one to start something, but if it came to him, he'd finish it. No hesitation, no apology. So yes, the Crip is gone. That version of him is buried. But like any ghost worth remembering, it never really stays buried. It lingers in the cadence of his voice, in the eyes that don't blink even when the cameras do. It whispers behind every line he's ever spoken on screen, in every refusal to bow when Hollywood told him to kneel.
You made huge headlines when you said after you complete these 15 episodes of Empire, you gotta walk away for a while or forever.
This is the paradox of Terrence Howard. He's not playing gangster. He never was. He is what most of them only imitate: grit born of truth, pain that never healed clean. Every performance is layered with a life that refused to be erased. You can't direct that. You don't teach it in drama school. You survive it, and if you're lucky, you make something beautiful out of the wreckage. His past has claws, the violence, the broken relationships, the courtroom drama. You can't scrub that from his name. But you also can't ignore a man who owns his scars, who doesn't flinch when reminded of his darkness. To see the boy who grew up watching his father spill blood in front of him. To see the teenager who had to build armor before he learned how to dream. To see the man who made it to the top and still chose to walk away. Even when he's planting watermelon seeds and talking about sacred geometry, that street energy is right under the surface. The code, the readiness, the demand for face-to-face confrontation if you question his honor. Some call it delusion. His science, his math, his metaphysics. But maybe it's just the same survival instinct that got him out of the streets, turned inward. The same intensity, rerouted. He doesn't do halfway. He never did. You can love him or hate him, quote him or cancel him, but you can't deny him, because Terrence Howard is two lives, one man, one foot in the mud, the other in the stars. Crip in the soul, scholar in the mind. The ghost of the streets lives on in him, not to haunt, but to remind that you don't escape where you came from. You transcend it, or you try. He'll tell you he's retired, that he's done acting, that he wants to spend the rest of his life doing something better for humanity. But don't mistake silence for surrender. That fire, still burning. That edge, still sharp. Terrence walks between two worlds, and somehow he's mastered them both. The street and the stage, the wound and the wonder, the shadow and the spotlight. Not everyone makes it out of one life. He made it out of two. And if you look closely, you'll see he never left either. He just learned how to carry both.